My first guest is a legend in the comic book industry. He's worked for DC Comics, Marvel Comics. He's drawn comics featuring Superman, Batman, Captain America, Spider-Man, the Hulk. You name the character, he's drawn them. He's also created Nexus and the Moth, groundbreaking titles in the comic book industry. Here he is, the icon, Steve, the Dude, Rude, ladies and gentlemen. I was practically stymied introducing you. I'm such a fan, and very honored that you would agree to be my guest on Phoenix tonight in this beautiful gallery. I think the setting is perfect for what you do, and I think the timing is right too, because Jack Kirby's birthday is right around the corner, and he was a legend to you, a coach, a mentor. Is that right?
Jack Kirby was a mentor to everyone who ever grew up in comic books. He served in World War II as a scout, and I was always told that your lifespan as a scout is about 5 minutes, because you're asked to go out and basically find out what's ahead, so that when the troops if the troops can advance to a different town, they want to know that there's not 1,000 bad guys waiting for them to blow their heads off. And so they sent a single person out, and it just happened to be on this particular day. They wanted a guy that could draw a picture. So they walked up to Jack Kirby and they said, "Are you the guy that created Captain America? We're all big fans." And Jack, 19-year-old Jack Kirby, says, "Yes, I am." And the sergeant says, "Well, we need someone that can draw, because we want to send you as a scout into the next town and draw what the layout of the land looks like, so that we don't get our heads blown off." And that was one of the things that Jack played over and over in his head, and he fueled him in his work for the next 60 years.
And he did indeed create Captain America. He wasn't speaking out of school. That's a truth. At 19 years old.
Yeah, Kirby was I kind of call him the Einstein of the comic book business, because his thinking was not rational. It wasn't of this earth. Anyone who ever grew up on a Jack Kirby comic book knew that his sense of imagination and everything that he brought the comic books that we're all trying to catch up on all these years later, it probably will be 100 years from now. That's how good the guy was.
He co-created some of the most popular and famous characters in comic book history. Captain America, of course, the rest of the Avengers, including the Incredible Hulk and Iron Man and Thor. He was the first to draw Spider-Man, even though Steve Ditko drew the interiors for Amazing Fantasy 15. Fantastic Four, X-Men, I mean, the list goes on and on. It's truly a fantastic resume that he has. And were you reading these comics as a kid, or did you come into it later as a professional artist?
I read them as a kid. We had, in the town I grew up in, Madison, Wisconsin, they had these thing called stop and goes. And all us kids would flock down to the stop and go and turn the spinner rack. And that's how we were able to see what came out that month. And I remember seeing Jack Kirby comic books from my very earliest memories. I probably would have been around 9 or 10.
Sure. And do you remember some of the first titles, or were they all the ones I just listed?
It was actually Captain America.
Oh, yes. When that would have been his return to Cap then, right? In the early 70s, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. When they originally created Captain America, it was actually during the war. It was actually during World War II when the creation of a character like that made a lot of sense. And Marvel, which was then called Timely Comic Books, had promised them royalties that they never gave the creators, which is Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. So they left. And years later, as things tend to happen sometimes, Kirby was brought back to Marvel Comic Books in the early 1960s, and they revived Captain America because they needed titles. And they just what they did was they took characters from the war years and revived all of them, which made a lot of sense because they knew what the characters were all about.
Your Cap and Namor, the Submariner. Is familiar with Namor?
And the Fantastic Four was a new creation, but it was based off comic books that had a proven selling record up until then. So it made sense to create a team like that. But it was the combination of the art and the writing by Stan Lee that brought the notoriety to this Fantastic Four that people had never seen before. They'd never seen superheroes fighting among themselves before. Everything was all hunky-dory in the tea room with most of the superheroes up until then. And when Kirby and Lee came along, they introduced something that a lot of domestic discontent into comic books, and it just kept rolling from there. But it was something new, and something new always gets noticed by people.
So when you're looking at that spinner rack, are you thinking to yourself, man, I got to get into this industry. I can draw, I can break in, or did looking at those comics inspire you to draw?
I doodled a lot as a kid. I didn't get serious about drawing until high school. And part of the reason I had to get serious is because I grew up in this I was in my high school years, I was growing up in a very small town, way up in the wilds of Michigan. And I had almost no friends to speak of, and I was lonely. So what does a high school kid do when you're under life conditions like that? Well, you start to dream a lot. You start to dream really big. The smaller your environment, the bigger your dreams get. And my dreams got pretty big, and I would just, I basically sat around all day copying drawings from comic books.
And how does that turn into, you're not drawing comic books professionally? Did you submit those drawings to a publisher, or were you discovered somewhere, as we all hope to be?
I was discovered eventually, but it wasn't by the big comic book companies in New York. I was discovered by some local people when I moved from that tiny little town up in Michigan back to Madison, Wisconsin. And there were some guys that wanted to start publishing comic books. It was a very new thing at that time. No one had been doing it. But there was somebody who set the precedent right before we got into this. And the book we ended up creating was a book called Nexus. That was back in 1980.
I have some Nexus comic books right here from my personal collection. Yes, believe it or not, I am a comic book collector. I don't know if you guys put that together, but here's issue number 15 of Nexus. You guys see that? Well, I had nothing to do with the email, but I appreciate there's that one. And here's Nexus GodCon 1, which I think is a more recent release compared to this number 15. But who is Nexus?
Nexus is a cosmic executioner. He was actually created by my writing partner, Mike Barron. And Mike Barron was working at a job that he hated. I was washing dishes, so obviously that wasn't a job that I wanted to keep doing for the rest of my life. I washed so many dishes. But what I could never get over, it was the same dishes being washed over and over. I just couldn't understand that. But yeah, that's what we did until we eventually got an offer, Mike Barron and I, Mike Barron, the writer, me, the artist, to come up with something that these local guys thought would sell. And I was always into superheroes. That was always my thing. And they wanted the superhero, so we gave them one. And it was called Nexus.
And you later created, or co-created the Moth as well, that I have some issues of here.
Yeah, the Moth was kind of this weird idea that I had. I was trying to justify why a guy would, in real life, because we treated this real life, would walk around in a costume like that. You know, he's either deranged, or he's serious, or he works in the circus.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the Moth, he works in the circus. That's part of his outfit.
Well, that's cool. That's a very practical approach. Hear that, Mom? I could have easily taken a job in the circus. So who are some of your favorite characters to draw? These are characters you've created, and like I said earlier, you've drawn characters for Marvel and DC that are very well known worldwide now, thanks to the films, film adaptations, whatnot. Who are some of your favorite characters too?
I'm a little more picky than most guys. You'd be surprised how much stuff I turn down that would net me huge amounts of money. In fact, I was just recently offered several jobs from DC comic books, and I had to explain to these guys that if I don't like the script, I really have a hard time drawing something that I don't really believe in. So I remember the kids walked up to me. We were kind of behind on our bills, like most freelance artists are. And one of my kids walked up and says, "Daddy, is it true you turned down $16,000 from DC?" I said, "You should know your daddy by now."
which means yes, you did.
Which means yes. Yeah.
Well, you brought a lot of art, and I barely know where to begin, but we have this beautiful Wonder Woman piece that's set up behind us here. And I noticed it was painted the year I graduated high school. That's kind of cool.
That was on purpose.
I appreciate it.
It's a graduation gift, but I didn't know you at the time.
Oh, that's too bad.
We have to install the gift-giving aspect.
If I could maybe suggest that I'll go back and get a GED 2. Is that available? Can I get a GED 2?
Anything is possible in the world of comic books.
So Wonder Woman's here, and her film just came out. So as somebody that creates these characters in a tangible way, in a visual way, when you see these characters on film, does it take your breath away? Are you more critical?
Well, in the case of a lot of the movies that I've seen recently, I thought they were tremendously well done. In fact, I would say that if Jack Kirby was alive today, Jack Kirby died in 1994 at the age of 74, I think. He would have been very favorably impressed, and he was always someone that looked. He could look into the future in ways that common people couldn't do. And he always predicted that superheroes would dominate the movie business someday. And he was right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest films he would have seen before his passing would have been like Michael Keaton's Batman in 1989 or Howard the Duck in the early 80s. Those are true adaptations he would have seen.
I think Jack might have been waiting for a really good Captain America movie.
Sure.
Which I think they delivered pretty well. Marvel's done a very good job. But I must say, when I walked out of that Wonder Woman movie, I was stunned by it. It was a spectacle, a 4-star spectacle, really the highest rating I could give a movie. It was just tremendous. Have you guys seen the movie?
Mm-hmm. Wonder Woman?
Yeah, what was your impression of? Yeah, it was just superbly well done.
I think it's your duty as a woman.
I'm going to go tonight, I think, actually. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go after this.
Now, people talk about that movie. This is kind of deviating from the topic a little bit, but people talk about that movie as groundbreaking, that it has a strong female protagonist, and yet there are movies like Tomb Raider, Ghost in the Shell that came out recently. They have strong female leads as well. What is it about Wonder Woman's character that is triumphant over those characters we've seen in the past?
I don't know if it has much to do with gender. I think it's just personal character. I think everyone, male or female, and whatever else they're thinking of nowadays, just has when you meet people that have a strong character that has a strong sense of right and wrong, and will literally risk, a lot of things to. What am I trying to say here?
A sense of self-sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice is a good way to look for it.
Nobility.
Yeah, you can go through. The system can really beat you up when you challenge it. Sometimes I myself have some direct experience having gone through that myself. You really learn to think about your sense of who you are, what you believe in. And if it ever gets put to the test, it's going to be a trial.
And Wonder Woman is the kind of character that has withstood the test of time in that way. So women and men are able to project themselves into her and feel a sense of personal triumph over their own challenges and tragedies. Is that what you're?
Well, I would say if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. This was a woman that had strong convictions about right and wrong, and luckily she had. Some pretty amazing powers to back those convictions up, which always helps.
Is that why you think superheroes have stood the test of time? I mean, the industry itself has gone through ups and downs as far as popularity and financial stability. Do you think everybody describes this now as a modern mythology? Do you think that's true as somebody that contributes to the stories, or is that too lofty, not lofty enough?
Well, how does one answer that? Honestly, when I draw my comic books, when I sit there day after day for the last 35 years at the drawing board, I'm just there's a strong sense of instinct that you're relying on as you sit there day after day after day. That just keeps you going. can't really, really wouldn't know how to answer that. It's just, to me, it's a blast. I mean, you don't do something like this unless it's a lot of fun for you. And it's always challenging. You get up every day and you're challenged to be creative in the utmost way. Somehow, some people are just kind of slide into that groove in life, and it's very challenging. The research alone and a good comic book story can really knock you out sometimes. You've really got to work hard to make the art, the narrative of the art, interesting, and make people feel like they're really engaged in an actual story that's taking place in real life.
Speaking of engaging fans, Comic-Cons have become really popular, right, since you started in the industry, and so you're a regular at some Comic-Cons. I've seen you at Phoenix Comic-Con, had some of these books signed by you there. How's that changed the game as far as being able to meet fans face to face, some of them dressed as the very characters you've drawn?
Yeah, that's kind of a funny thing to take note of. At the Phoenix Comic-Con, I think there's more people dressed up than there's people that work in the industry. So that trend is really taken.
I'm cosplaying right now as Hydro Man. I don't know if you guys have put this together. This is planned.
Well, I tell you, they started out real small. Comic book conventions started out just real tiny, just like the Star Trek conventions. But word travels, and somehow these things have gotten to be just mammothly huge. There's no stopping these things. I don't know where it's all going to end, but San Diego routinely holds, I think the number is 170,000 people, and that's. If anyone ever been to that San Diego show before, it's a sight to behold, I must say.
It's pretty crazy too, considering the stereotype that nerds don't get laid. Yet we're reproducing exponentially to fill these cons from the hundreds to the tens of thousands. Who would have thought we were on the ground floor of something that would have been this popular?
Who would have thought?
Right here. You know what we're going to do? Take a break right now. So if you're watching on YouTube, we will revisit some of this amazing art that Steve's brought in our next segment. So stick around. We'll be right back.